Well, if the only people who had to weigh in on the issue were the 435 members of the House and 100 United States senators, the three of you could head up to the Hill and we could get this done very quickly. But there's a country of 310 million people to worry about, and I'm not sure that this is such an easy sell. Juan Carlos?
Well, no. We saw that back in 2006, 2007, when President Bush made a huge effort to pass a comprehensive immigration bill, which was pretty good in general terms, and his own party blocked him on that. We saw the reaction of a conservative movement around the country, TV networks lambasting immigration reform, some firebrands in the Republican Party. But then we saw the consequences of those actions in 2006 and 2008. We saw how the Latino voters who went 40% for George W. Bush in 2004 voted 2 to 3 for Barack Obama in 2008. And I think that many people realize within the conservative movement, at least within the Republican Party, that that's a defeatist strategy to alienate Latino voters. I would expect that the Republican Party has grown up, has learned the lessons, and know that this is good for their own future, and this is good also for the country and the economy.
Juan Carlos, for members of Congress who are wavering, will business make its voice heard? Agriculture and food processing, construction and light assembly, the industries that really rely heavily on immigrant labor.
Well, the economy needs immigrant labor. We run this study at the Cato Institute early last year, and we run several models, economic models, and we found that if a plan similar to the one explained by Alfonso, with legalization paths for immigrant and a guest worker program, will add to the economy around $180 billion a year in net benefits. So we're talking here about a stimulus package for the economy if we passed immigration reform. So it's certainly in the benefit of the business community to push for and get behind the president and those in Congress who support this measure. One of the good things about what's going on is that the Hispanic community has learned to be assertive on this issue. It's not waiting quietly until President Obama finally makes his mind about this issue. They're pushing for it, they're talking, they're rallying, and this is good for immigration reform. And also the Hispanic community should let the president and the Democrats in the House and the Senate know that their votes are not to be given for granted, because then they can just wait in the silence, and take for granted these votes of the Hispanic voters for the next election, which will be a shame.
Now, between now and November, you and I are probably going to work most of the time. Mm-hmm. Show up at jobs, put in a certain number of hours. But legislators don't live lives exactly like that. How many weeks of actual work are there between today in April and Election Day in November?
The timeline we have been thinking about is the August recess, and there are about 17 weeks there. We believe, and really given what Senator Reid and Senator Durbin said just this last weekend, where they both said they want immigration reform in 2010, and they in fact want to start the process now. That means that by May, we want to see bipartisan legislation introduced by Senators Schumer and Graham. They've been working a long time. It's about time they introduce a bill. Get it through the Judiciary Committee in the course of May, early June. We're on the floor in the Senate, June and July, and we know that Speaker Pelosi and her team have been doing the hard work that's necessary to move it through the House. There's no excuse why this can't happen, and even Senator Reid said, there's no reason why this can't happen now, and we can't let something like a Supreme Court nominee bog down the process.
I hope that that's the case, but we have to take into account that Supreme Court nominee that is coming up, and that's going to suck the air out of the room in Washington, depending on who's the nominee. The relation between both parties is very acrimonious right now, and if President Obama names a liberal firebrand to the Supreme Court, we're going to see a lot of bipartisanship just like basically disappear in the Senate, and it has to go through the Judicial Committee. So I'm skeptical that the only thing that President Obama will say to the Latino community for the elections will be like, hey, I named a Latina justice to the Supreme Court.
Arizona is only the most prominent case, but in effect, have these local initiatives moved into a vacuum that exists because the federal government hasn't acted, Juan Carlos?
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Usually you will see me in this program talking about how something is not a federal issue but a state issue. But
That's true. That's a very unusual Cato talking point.
Immigration is a federal issue, so it is the federal government the one that has to set up a framework. And I agree with the leader of this Latino organization saying that letting local authorities to enforce immigration laws is kind of dangerous and it's not appropriate. So that's why we should expect the federal government to move in soon.
They would rather cross in a bus and show a document to a uniformed officer when they cross the border.
How much are they paying already to a coyote to get them through the border, and risking their lives, risking everything they have? I agree with everyone here. I don't think it's a problem of big government or small government, but it's an economic issue here. We have a lack of unskilled workers here in the United States. Once the economy starts recovering, there's going to be demand for unskilled workers, and we have a large pool of unskilled workers just across the border. And as long as the ratio of income between Mexico and the United States remains 1-7, basically, we're going to have a lot of supply of cheap labor from the South.
Does it become much harder in the next Congress?
I simply don't know. I mean, certainly Republicans are going to win seats, both in the Senate and the House. So far, the poll said that they might even win up to 8 seats in the Senate. So any effort will have to be more bipartisan by nature. We have to look at the profiles of those new senators coming to Washington and see if they have backed similar efforts, whether they are like current congressmen that are moving up to the Senate or people with a background in their own states. For example, we have senatorial elections in Nevada, for example. We see that Senator Harry Reid is in very deep trouble down there. He's one of the big supporters of immigration reform. Will the Republican candidate support such a comprehensive immigration reform? Well, it will be in his or her interest to do so, because we're talking about a state with a 25% of Hispanic population. So it's not going to be easier, but I think it's still doable. Look, I don't think that President Obama is pretty much concerned about Republican opposition. If he were, he wouldn't have passed healthcare legislation the way he did. And I don't think he's too much concerned also about a measure being unpopular. Well, let's talk again about healthcare reform. But I think that if he wants a good political fight, this is it. This is if actually Republicans were to oppose a comprehensive immigration reform, which is a big if, is in the president's benefit and is in the Democrats' benefit. And I think that this is a win-win situation for both political parties. And if the political stakes of reform are high, the economic stakes are even greater. You know, again, the economy is still weak. The economy needs some kind of a stimulus, not spending billions of dollars like Democrats like to do, but actually creating a legal market, a legal framework for immigrants. And we're talking here about the difference of $250 billion between the restrictive immigration reform and a legalization, liberal immigration reform. And I think that's why we need to support this.
If the phone rings on a desk in the White House, in the Congressional Liaison Office, and you pick it up and on the other end is a member saying, look, I won by the skin of my teeth in 2008 in a district that went slightly for John McCain, where illegal immigration is not popular. I'm taking hits. I don't think these people are right necessarily, but I'm taking hits locally because of my vote supporting the president on healthcare reform. Please don't make me take this vote before the November election. What do you tell Mr. or Mrs. Member?
I will say I will say to that member of Congress, this is gonna reduce illegal immigration because we're gonna legalize it. When the Bracero program was in place back in the 1950s, illegal apprehensions at the border were decreased by 95%.